NBA trade rumors have been off the hook so far in the offseason, but we're not even really there yet because the playoffs are still going on. I want you to name a big-time or a small-time player that could be traded this offseason. Jimmy Butler, Donovan Mithell, Paul George. We'll talk a lot about some of the big names on today's show, but let me know who you think could be traded this offseason. All right, welcome into NBA Now by Chat Sports. I am your host, Nic Rohloff, and on today's show, we're going to talk about the latest surrounding Jimmy Butler and the Heat star. What are the Lakers up to? That is a question that we will at least take a little bit of a look at. And then Paul George to round out today's episode. Is he staying in Los Angeles, or will he be leaving and potentially joining the Philadelphia 76ers? But first, let's start with Miami and Jimmy Butler, because the rumors surrounding the Heat star have been absolutely on fire. Pun was intended, by the way, this offseason. And I think it has to start with the extension, right? And this is what Anthony Chiang of the Miami Herald, who covers the Heat on a day-to-day basis, said. He said that Jimmy Butler wants a max extension this offseason, preferably from the Miami Heat. But whether it's from the Heat or another team, he wants a max extension. So it is very clear that the Heat don't really know what to do with Jimmy, and Jimmy wants to sign a long-term deal with the Heat. That deal would be a 2-year, $113 million extension, but the Heat have been a little non-committal to Jimmy Butler for the foreseeable future. Pat Riley called him out in his end-of-season press conference, saying that he needs to play more games and needs to be at least 65, 70 games a season. And people were shocked by that. And then when asked about extending Butler this offseason, he says we don't have to do that this offseason, which they don't. They can wait a year because Jimmy has a player option the following year. And he said there hasn't been any discussions to that point. But that is where the thing starts, because if the Heat extend him, there's nothing to talk about here. But if Butler is truly potentially on the open trade market, you can say, a lot of teams will line up for him, the Philadelphia 76ers being one of them. I mean, Jimmy's one of the best players in the NBA, averaging 20 points a game in the last 4 seasons for Miami. Had his best year shooting the 3 ball. He's a two-way player as well. And what every team craves, specifically in Miami, by the way, that you need to elevate your game in the postseason. Jimmy Butler is one of, if not the best playoff riser in the entire NBA. I mean, the Heat have made 2 finals in the last 5 years, and they have not been the most talented roster in their respective Eastern Conference any of those 2 seasons. But Jimmy Butler and that team just elevated their play, and Jimmy willed them to that point, especially when you see what he did last year in the first round against the Milwaukee Bucks. He is one of the best playoff players in the NBA, which obviously a lot of teams would covet. And the reason why, well, because he's so good. And those teams, who could they be that want Jimmy Butler? Anthony Chiang had to say this as well in that same article. He said along with the 76ers, according to league sources, there are 2 other teams that have made it known in league circles that they would be willing to trade for Butler and sign him to a max-level contract. Butler turns 35 on September 14th. So it's interesting that he named Philly, which was obvious, but said there was 2 other teams. Well, could we have gotten an update on who one of those teams were this offseason in the form of Golden State Warriors? Because there was a report today that if Jimmy Butler was actually made available on the trade market, the Golden State Warriors would definitely have interest. So maybe they were one of the 2 mystery teams, which puts the Sixers and Warriors at the top of the list. The other 3, who could be that other remaining team? I think the Houston Rockets are a sneaky team for Jimmy Butler. That's where he is from. He's from Houston. The Rockets have an affinity to try to rapidly increase this rebuild. Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson. They have also Cam Whitmore, Jalen Green, Elfrid Sengun, Fred VanVleet. Who stays, who would go in that trade? I don't know, but adding Butler could help them at least be a playoff threat next year. The Pelicans, same thing. Could they move off B.I. to upgrade at that 3 spot alongside Zion Williamson, C.J. McCollum, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy? And the Thunder are an intriguing team as well. SGA, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren. You can trade for Jimmy, give him that 2-year Supermax extension if you're Oklahoma City, and then let that 2-year contract run out. And then once that extension goes, well, guess what? And it's time to pay Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. That kind of timeline works pretty well for OKC. Now, I will say that with everything being considered, most people do expect Jimmy Butler to remain with the Miami Heat. And if you're tapped in with the Miami Heat media, you would know this because the reports are, at least out of the possible scenarios between Miami and Jimmy, number one is that he stays on this team but doesn't get an extension. Number two would be he gets an extension. And then number three would be they trade him. So it's probably at the bottom of that list. It's more likely that he doesn't get an extension and then just opts out and becomes a free agent next offseason. But that will be a story that we have to keep our eye on. But before we move on to the second portion of today's show, let's put a capstone on the Jimmy Butler talk and we'll get your opinion down below. Predict it for me. Will Jimmy Butler stay with the Miami Heat this offseason? Doesn't have to be long-term, but just throughout the summer and be on that Heat roster come in September and October. Type S if you think he stays, L if you think he leaves. All right, let's get to the Lakers offseason plan. What could they be up to? They still have to find a head coach, at least as of filming this. They have not hired anyone, but it seems like J.J. Redick and James Borrega are at the top of their list. But there was actually a report today, and rumor, if you will, from Jovan Buha, who covers the Lakers for The Athletic, that named these four players as trade targets for the Lakers. 2 Atlanta Hawks and Trae Young and Dejounte Murray, and then 2 Cleveland Cavaliers and Donovan Mithell and Darius Garland. One thing that remains very clear to me is that they want a lead guard to add to that dynamic duo of LeBron and Anthony Davis. I think they hoped that a combination of D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves would do the trick in the backcourt. That evidently was not the case. So adding a either scoring combo guard in Donovan Mithell or a pure point guard in a Trae Young, Darius Garland to help take the load off of LeBron James's shoulders throughout the regular season and let him cook in crunch time in the postseason, as well as create a nice little pick and roll partner on the offensive end for Anthony Davis, seems like at the top of the priority list for Rob Pelinka in Los Angeles. More on the conversation on who I think the most likely is for the Lakers, but we are sponsored by Prize Picks, the number one daily fantasy sports app in North America with more than 5 million members. It's so easy to play. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stat projections for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. If you're looking for promotions, by the way, Prize Picks has you covered on a weekly basis. From lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays, which increases your chances of getting a win, to getting your entry fees back. If you have a losing lineup on Fridays, Prize Picks will have you covered. You could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make Prize Picks lineups as little as 60 seconds. You just need to pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're locked in. You could go to the NBA playoffs as the finals are just around the corner. You go to the NHL, MLB, MMA. They have it all. You can also look towards the future with NFL season-long projections, which is what I have on this particular lineup. More than 850.5 rushing yards for DeAndre Swift. And then I'll stay in the NFC North with an Amon-Ra St. Brown more than 7.5 receiving touchdowns. Join me, join other celebrities like Stephen A. Smith playing Prize Picks on a daily basis by downloading the app and using code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. You can also click on that link in the description and comments of today's video. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Use code CLNS to get a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Appreciate Prize Picks for sponsoring today's video. They are the best. I play them on a daily basis. All right, all eyes are looking towards the Atlanta Hawks and Cleveland Cavaliers if you're a Los Angeles Lakers fan and really honestly an NBA fan, because when you look back at the trade targets that were mentioned for the Lakers, well, 2 of these guys are likely to be dealt, right? Here's the situation. Atlanta knows they cannot go into the future with Trae Young and Dejounte Murray. It's been a disaster in Atlanta in that backcourt. They just don't fit well together. And to be honest, I don't know why the Hawks ever made that trade because it always looked like it was a bad fit. So the question is who gets traded from them? But then if we shift our eyes to Cleveland, if Donovan Mitchell signs a long-term extension with the Cavs, Darius Garland is going to request a trade. If Donovan Mitchell gets traded away from Cleveland, well, that means Darius Garland's going to stay. So to me, you're going to see two of those guys be dealt. And if you're the Lakers, unfortunately for you, I'd rule out Donovan Mitchell. So if you rule out Donovan Mitchell and he were to get dealt to a different team, say it is the Miami Heat, say it's a other random team like Brooklyn or something like that, well, that means Garland's staying in the Cleveland Cavaliers organization. You missed out on Mitchell because allegedly Dan Gilbert doesn't want to trade him to the Lakers. And then you have to turn your focus to which Atlanta Hawks guard gets dealt, which means I think it's more likely that it's Trae Young heading to the Lakers, because I do believe that Landry Fields and the Hawks are going to choose to build around Dejounte Murray, Jalen Johnson, maybe DeAndre Hunter. There's rumors about him getting dealt as well, and then whoever they take with that first overall pick. So if I were to predict that the one player out of those 4 trade targets that it was rumored the Lakers could target this offseason, I think Trae Young is the most likely. And I do believe they have enough of a trade package to acquire Young, whether it be Austin Reeves and a pair of first-round picks. They also could include Jared Vanderbilt as well, as it's rumored that he could be made available in any type of trade package. So if you're a Lakers fan, I think that Trae Young is one of those guards you have to keep your eye out for this offseason. So make the call for me. Will the Lakers trade for Ice Trae Young? If you believe Rob Pelinka will make a blockbuster deal for the Hawks point guard, type Y for yes. If you think they go in a different direction or miss out on Young, you can type N for no, but let me know your thoughts down below. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel as well, because we are going to have coverage on a weekly basis surrounding the NBA, whether it be trade rumors, draft rumors, free agency news. We'll also be live for the big events like free agency and the NBA draft, so hit that sub button. All right, let's shift over to Paul George now, the Clippers guard, because he's been in the news recently on about what he could do in free agency, because he is a free agent if he opts out of his deal, as he is looking for a Supermax extension. And there's really only 2 outcomes for Paul George, in my opinion. He's either re-signing with the Los Angeles Clippers on a 4-year deal or heading over to Philadelphia in free agency as an unrestricted free agent. I would lean towards him remaining with the Clippers. There's been a lot of different reports and rumors out there that the Clippers don't want to pay Paul George more than they paid Kawhi Leonard, so that would give Philly the edge. But then there's a lot of more buzz about him re-signing with LA, especially after Ty Lue got a 5-year extension as their head coach. And if you look at the odds for Paul George's next team or remaining, whatever the situation unfolds, the Clippers hold the edge at minus 255, 76ers at plus 350, 1,200 for the Magic, which would be an intriguing fit, by the way. I'd actually love that for the Orlando and Paul George. 1,500 for the Lakers, and then the Heat and Pelicans at 2,000. I want to make an interesting note here with the Clippers and Sixers, because if you just went back a week and a half, those two were flipped. The odds-on favorite to be Paul George's team in 2024 was the Philadelphia 76ers. But that has changed in big favor of Los Angeles, and to me, that is just the signaling of the long-term commitment to Ty Lue. Because if you're going to spend on Ty Lue, because his contract was in the air, right? They could have won in a full rebuild. They could have moved off of Paul George by letting him walk, trade Kawhi Leonard, and kind of go into a rebuild. But I don't think that's the case. The reports are they're going to keep Ty Lue, obviously. They're going to pay Paul George. They're going to try to keep James Harden in Los Angeles as well and kind of run it back with a PG, James Harden, Kawhi big three, because they were one of the best teams in the NBA for most of the season prior to some injuries, and then that really derailed them down the stretch. So I imagine that the Clippers are going to run it back again with Harden, Paul George, and Kawhi Leonard, and maybe this is the year they finally get over the hump. That will do it for today's Rumors video. Appreciate everyone for watching, and if you have made it through the entire video, give me a follow on Twitter at Nic_Rohloff, talking NBA basketball on a daily basis, so go give me a follow. And if you stayed here throughout the video, you obviously like what I was giving you, at least in terms of information, so why not go for more with me on Twitter at Nic_Rohloff.